I was standing in the fluorescent-lit break room of a national electronics retailer on September 15th, 2008, watching a 13-inch CRT television as the news anchor announced the collapse of Lehman Bros. While the global financial infrastructure was incinerating, my district manager walked in, poured a cup of lukewarm coffee, and told me to make sure we pushed the high-interest store credit cards harder that week because corporate was nervous about quarterly projections. That was the moment I realized the system isn't just rigged. It is engineered to harvest your desperation. The first $1,000 you try to save isn't money. It is a declaration of war against an economy designed to keep you at zero. Most financial gurus will tell you to skip the latte or cancel Netflix to build your initial wealth. They speak from a position of comfort, completely ignoring the psychological warfare waged on the working class. I am Leo Miller. Before I understood money, I managed a retail floor during the worst economic recession of our lifetime. I saw firsthand how decision fatigue destroys your ability to save. I watched good people, hardworking people, spiraled into debt not because they were lazy, but because they were exhausted. Today, we are not discussing investment portfolios or real estate flipping. We are discussing the hardest thing you will ever do in finance: breaking the gravitational pull of living paycheck to paycheck. Achieving that first $1,000 in liquidity is not a math problem. It is a prison break. To understand why saving that first grand feels physically impossible, you have to understand the environment that fights against you. Back in 2008, my job as a manager was effectively to manage the decline of the American consumer. Every aisle in that store was scientifically calibrated to exploit cognitive depletion. We knew that by the time a customer reached the checkout counter, after comparing specifications on televisions they couldn't afford and worrying about the gas bill waiting at home, their willpower was non-existent. That is when we struck. That is when we offered the financing plan with the deferred interest that would eventually balloon and crush them. I watched it happen hundreds of times a week. This is what I call the retail prison. The system relies on you being too tired to make good decisions. When you have $0 in the bank, every single choice is high. If you buy the wrong brand of pasta, you might not have bus fare on Friday. If you pay the electric bill a day early, the check for rent might bounce. This constant, low-level panic floods your brain with cortisol. It creates a tunnel vision where you can only focus on immediate survival, making long-term planning literally impossible from a neurological standpoint. I remember a specific customer, a man in his 40s, staring at a washing machine. His old one had broken, and he had 3 kids. He didn't have the $400 to buy the basic model outright. Because he lacked that liquidity, that safety net, he had to finance it over the next 2 years. He paid nearly $900 for that machine. Being poor is expensive. The fees, the interest rates, the inability to buy in bulk, it is a tax on having nothing. When you try to save your first $1,000, you are fighting against this inertia. You are trying to stop the bleeding while the hospital is charging you by the drop. During the crash, I saw my own bank account hovering around negative balances due to overdraft fees that were processed in the most punitive order possible. The bank would clear the largest checks first to ensure the account went to zero faster, triggering multiple $35 fees for buying a sandwich or a pack of gum. This wasn't an accident. It was a revenue strategy. Recognizing this malice is the first step. You are not bad with money. You are in a hostile environment. The transition from victim of the system to architect of your own life begins with a period of extreme, almost monastic deprivation. Primera ka LLDs de lockdown phase. When I decided to break the cycle in 2009, I didn't just budget, I stopped participating in the economy. I realized that the first $1,000 could not be earned through a side hustle initially because my mind was too cluttered with survival stress. It had to be clawed back from my existing consumption. This is the part nobody likes to hear. I moved into a studio apartment that smelled of damp drywall. I sold the car I couldn't afford and took a bus that added 90 minutes to my commute. I ate rice and beans for 6 months. I disappeared from my social circle. Why? Because I needed to insulate myself from the triggers of spending. Every time you leave your house, the world is trying to extract capital from you. Saving the first $100 feels good. Saving $300 is painful because the car breaks down or a tooth cracks, and you are back to zero. This is the filter. This is where everyone quits. They say, "See, it's impossible." Something always comes up. They don't realize that something is the accumulated debt of years of deferred maintenance on their lives. When I finally hit $600, my transmission blew. In the past, I would have put it on a credit card. This time, I walked to work for 3 weeks in the rain. I refused to touch the capital. That specific decision, the refusal to retreat into debt, was the psychological turning point. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could endure discomfort to protect my future. The first $1,000 is an accumulation of no to the happy hour, no to the upgrade, no to the convenience. It is a lonely, cold place to be, but you have to embrace that isolation. You are deprogramming decades of consumer conditioning. You are building a wall between you and the chaos. When I finally saw that comma in my bank account, $1,000, I didn't feel joy. I felt a cold, hard resolve. I sat in my empty apartment, looked at the screen, and realized I had bought something far more valuable than a television. I had bought my dignity back. Once you secure that first $1,000, the physics of your life change. This is what financiers call escape velocity. But on a micro scale, when you have $0, a flat tire is a crisis that forces you into high-interest debt, setting you back months. When you have $1,000, a flat tire is merely an inconvenience. You pay for it, and you still have $800 left. You don't spiral. This prevents the compound interest of poverty from taking hold. The mental bandwidth that was previously consumed by the fear of an overdraft fee is suddenly freed up. I recall the first month, I didn't have to check my balance before buying groceries. That mental clarity allowed me to perform better at work. I wasn't distracted by financial anxiety, so I became more effective, which eventually led to a promotion. This is the upward spiral. The money begins to work for you. Not in terms of investment returns, yet $1,000 at 5% interest is negligible, but in terms of opportunity costs, you can now buy the higher quality work boots that last 2 years instead of the cheap ones that break in 3 months. You can pay your insurance in a 6-month lump sum to get the discount. You stop paying the poor tax. The first $1,000 is the hardest because you are pushing a boulder uphill. The next $10,000 is significantly easier because the ground has leveled out. You are no longer bleeding out from unnecessary fees. From that initial stability, I was able to look at the market not with fear, but with strategy. I began to educate myself on index funds and real estate, concepts that were gibberish to me when I was worried about paying for heat. The journey from $1,000 to $100,000 took me 5 years. But the journey from $0 to $1,000 took me nearly a decade of trial and error too. Figure out the mindset. Do not underestimate this milestone. It is the foundation upon which every empire is built. If you can suffer through the restriction required to get that first block of capital, you possess the discipline to manage millions. If you cannot, no lottery win will ever save you. The system is waiting for you to slip. It is waiting for you to get tired, to get emotional, and to swipe that card. The first $1,000 is your shield against that vulnerability. It is not about being wealthy. It is about being unbreakable. The 2008 crash taught me that nobody is coming to save you. You must save yourself. Dollar by excruciating dollar. Once you break those chains, you will never go back. Start today, not tomorrow. Look at your expenses and find the bloodletting. Stop it. Endure the discomfort. Build your wall. This isn't just about money. It's about reclaiming your life, one disciplined choice at a time. If this message resonates, if you've ever felt the weight of that boulder or the sting of the poor tax, then you already know what to do next. The system wants you to forget this video in 5 minutes. Don't let it pause. Rewind. Take one action today, cut one expense, move $1 that your future self will thank you for. Because the people who build empires aren't the ones who watch videos like this. They're the ones who act. And as YouTube, in its infinite wisdom, has already queued up a video it thinks will complement this journey. Trust the algorithm on this one. Thank you for being here, for fighting the good fights, and for proving that unbreakable is a choice. Until next time, stay disciplined, and I'll see you on the other side.